Few cartel kingpins are as feared or notorious as Joaquin Guzman, aka El Chapo. He once ruled the Sinaloa cartel. At his peak, he was bringing in $3 billion each year. He controlled half of the entire Mexican narcotics trade. He owned a couple of yachts, a fleet of Learjets, a diamond-encrusted pistol, and a private zoo with tigers, crocodiles, and panthers. But he wasn't just a good businessman. He was a ruthless criminal who climbed the cartel pyramid by killing, maiming, and bribing. So it was no surprise that there was a $5 million reward on his head. El Chapo was arrested and sent to prison twice, but he escaped. However, after the third arrest in 2016, he was sent to a maximum security prison in the US, a prison so tough, no one has ever escaped. Let's explore every detail about El Chapo's Supermax prison and how the once terrifying kingpin lives his life today. When El Chapo was arrested in Guatemala in 1993, he already was a notorious criminal. He'd entered the narcotics trade at a very young age, then progressed with the help of Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, aka El Padrino, Spanish for the Godfather. He was the leader of the famous Guadalajara cartel and the godfather of all modern cartels. When El Padrino was arrested in 1989, El Chapo saw this as a great opportunity. He would grow his own cartel, the Sinaloa, and become the new leader of Mexican trafficking. In 1993, he was arrested and sentenced to 20 years in prison. But in 2001, he escaped in a prison laundry cart after bribing prison officials some $2.5 million. El Chapo lived on the run for 13 years before he was arrested again in 2014. He was sent to a maximum security prison in Mexico, but bribery and a giant fortune meant El Chapo could get away again. So he used a team to build an underground tunnel under his prison cell shower. But El Chapo couldn't just ride into the sunset. He'd escaped from prison twice, and the DEA was fighting hard to have him extradited to the US and tried for his crimes on American soil. So in 2016, El Chapo was once again arrested, except this time, he was taken to the United States. You could see the fear on El Chapo's face from the very first minutes in the US airport. That's probably because he knew it was game over. In 2019, he was found guilty of a number of criminal charges related to his Sinaloa kingpin status. He'd ordered hits, bribed officials, and supervised countless shipments. He was sentenced to life imprisonment in ADX Florence, Colorado. On July 19, 2019, El Chapo arrived at his Colorado prison cell. He was now inside the same prison as the Unabomber and the Oklahoma City bomber. These are super high-profile inmates that are considered particularly dangerous and prone to escaping, so their treatment inside the prison matches that. El Chapo, and as well as his fellow inmates, spend 23 hours a day inside a soundproof cell. Their only hour of spare time is thoroughly supervised. Not only are prisoners supervised by several guards during rack time, but they're also cuffed and shackled, and their torsos are chained as well. They can't run, jump, or do anything sudden. Of course, phones are also off the table. In fact, the only kind of technology available is a small black and white TV set in their cell, and inmates only receive this TV if they demonstrate a good behavior over a long period of time. El Chapo gets to watch TV if he wants, but the prison selects the programs, so no streaming or HD TV. If this sounds extreme, it's only because ADX Florence was built especially for dangerous, escape-prone convicts. ADX Florence is the highest security prison in the US, but it hasn't been around for a very long time. It opened its gates on November 30th, 1994. The Florence Supermax was built as a result of several incidents in other US prisons. During the 1980s, for example, security guards were stabbed to death at the Marion Federal Prison, so ADX Florence set out to make a building impossible to escape, where there are more guards than prisoners and a tight schedule that doesn't allow them to cause as much damage. This is why it's called the Alcatraz of the Rockies. ADX only hosts about 375 inmates. That's a small number if you consider the amount of effort they put into security. Gun towers surround the prison. There are several rows of razor wire fences and dozens of guards at every corner. So El Chapo won't be escaping anytime soon. But it's not just ADX Florence's security system that has people talking. It's life at the prison that's seriously debated. Here's what the warden said about the prison.
I don't know what hell is, but I do know that the assumption would be for a free person, would be pretty close to it.
For starters, the inmates spend 23 hours in solitary confinement. According to the United Nations, this qualifies as torture. worse than ignoring basic human rights. It is said that around a third of the Florence Supermax inmates suffer from severe mental illnesses, but after spending day after day in solitary confinement, the other 2/3 might discover some new mental health issues too. A 2012 lawsuit against the ADX stated,
It was alleged that years of isolation and almost no human contact had seriously eroded the social skills and the ability to adapt to ADX Florence inmates.
the only contact with the outside world is a 4-inch window, and looking out, you can only see the sky. That way, no inmate ever knows where their cell is. There are several accounts of ADX Florence inmates screaming for hours or hurting themselves as they simply go mad inside their tiny cells.
Some mutilate their bodies with razors, shards of glass, sharpened chicken bones, writing utensils, and whatever other objects they can attain.
One particularly creepy incident involving an inmate biting off both his pinky fingers during a psychotic episode. Is this something he would have done in the outside world or in another prison? Or did the extreme isolation at the Florence Supermax lead to this terrifying moment? There have also been cases of inmates taking their own lives in pretty gruesome ways.
A number swallow razor blades, nail clippers, parts of radios and television, broken glass, and other dangerous objects.
The Florence Supermax is home to a big number of very dangerous people. One of them is a 1993 World Trade Center bomber, Ramzi Youssef. The only person convicted for the 9/11 attacks is also at ADX Florence. The Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, terrorized the US with bombs for 2 decades before his arrest and transfer to the Florence Supermax, and several other infamous bombers, from the Oklahoma City bomber to the Boston Marathon bomber, are held here. But not all FDX Florence inmates are the worst of the worst. Some of them are inmates with discipline issues. They have been transferred from other prisons where they attacked fellow prisoners or guards. But the insane treatment is the same for everyone. Every inmate sleeps and spends most of their day alone in a 7 by 12 foot cell. There's a shower that works with a timer to prevent flooding, and a steel unit comprised the toilet, sink, and mirror. But the prisoners can't shower whenever they want. The shower is only turned on automatically 3 times a week. Inmates won't even be able to sleep for too long either. The bed is literally a concrete slab with a thin mattress and a blanket. Comfort is not exactly a priority at the Florence Supermax. All furniture is made of concrete, and the toilet unit is fixed to the floor because ADX wants to prevent inmates from making DIY weapons from them. Mealtime is also rough. The inmates get food delivered straight to their cells through small double sliding doors. They eat alone, and they can't talk to other inmates down the hall. There are very few escapes from the madness of solitary confinement at Florence Supermax. For starters, there's a library, and inmates can borrow books and magazines to read in their cells. Then, there are telephone calls, but these are limited to 15 minutes a month. In other prisons, inmates can talk to their families every day, even if the calls are recorded and have a time limit. However, the ADX does allow visits up to 5 times a month, but all these visits have to be justified, and inmates are once again heavily supervised. In most prisons, solitary confinement is used as punishment for a few hours or a day. Prisoners spend time in solitary confinement for attacking people and breaking prison rules. But in Florence Supermax, this is the norm. It's an eerie feeling just walking down its corridors, as former warden Robert Hood said.
The ADX is a far starker environment than any other prison I've ever seen, and I've been to all of the federal prisons.
For the first 3 years inside the ADX, prisoners aren't allowed to have contact with other prisoners. Their 1 hour of rack time is also spent alone, in an empty room with a pull-up bar or a caged pen in the yard. After 3 years, and with a good behavior record, they can spend their spare hour talking to other inmates. During an inmate's last year at the prison, they get 4 spare hours each day. They can also serve their meals with fellow inmates. But all of this is impossible for El Chapo. He will be spending the rest of his life inside the Florence Supermax. As of 2022, El Chapo has been at the ADX Florence for 3 years. His wife Emma has been fighting hard to earn him a more humane treatment.
Lo que pedimos es que lo atiendan y que pues apliquen los derechos humanos con él. No estamos pidiendo algo otra cosa, solamente que lo dejen descansar.
El Chapo still has no human contact, bar the minutes spent with the prison guards. He's being kept at Range 13, the ADX block for the most dangerous criminals. He doesn't even have access to a normal shower. He gets washed with a hose, as he once dug a tunnel under his shower to escape prison. El Chapo has filed an appeal for his prison sentence. His lawyer stated,
The deprivation of sunlight and fresh air over an extensive 27-month period is causing psychological scarring. He is suffering many symptoms of distress as a result of this lengthy, unwarranted punishment.
whether his punishment is unwarranted or not, that's up for you to decide. After all, El Chapo did have lots of people killed just to have more money and power within his cartel. But what should punishment entail? Should even the worst criminals be kept in maddening conditions? According to Emma and El Chapo's lawyers, he can barely sleep because the lights and the noisy air conditioning are always on. Furthermore, he complained that the guards are constantly chatting in the hallway, making rest virtually impossible. Emma even complained that El Chapo's blood pressure is dangerously up these days, and she is worried for his life at the Florence Supermax. After the COVID-19 pandemic, visits were also suspended, so El Chapo couldn't see his family or his lawyers for a long time. At the moment, it's unclear just how much contact El Chapo is allowed with the outside world. But what's clear is that he is trying hard to escape the harsh conditions of ADX Florence. However, he won't be able to escape prison this time. Unless the appeal works, he will spend the rest of his life in the highest security prison in the United States. Does El Chapo deserve his current treatment? DEA Special Agent Ray Donovan said it clearly.
This is the kind of fate that a man responsible for unspeakable violence and death deserves. Thousands of people died or were ordered killed because of the Sinaloa cartel. So yeah, he doesn't leave his cell. It is boring, it's monotonous, it is very sad, but here's the difference. He's alive, and that means he could do plenty of things, unlike many of his victims.
Do you agree with Ray Donovan? Should El Chapo, or any prisoner really, get more humane treatment no matter the gravity of their actions? Let me know down in the comments section. And before you go, make sure you hit those like and subscribe buttons. You don't ever want to miss a new episode. See you all next time.